In this session, we're going to be working with layers. When I first started with Photoshop, one of the more difficult things for me was to try to understand the concept of layers. In this tutorial, I'm going to offer you a simple explanation on how layers work. And the name of our company is called By-LayerCake, and therefore you're going to see exactly why we named it what we did. The first thing we want to do is we want to go to Photoshop here, and I'm going to click the window, and I'll come down and hit Layer. And to the right here, you will see the layer palette. The most important thing is to check where it says Auto Select. As you can see, the background is transparent. Therefore, the first layer, which I'll click on right here, and you'll see it's selected in the layer palette, is referred to as background. We're going to name that. I'm going to double click here. And we're going to name that Layer 1. And we'll call it Cake. And we'll click out of it. Now let's add another layer to the cake. So I'm now going to bring in strawberries. We will now name that layer number 2, Strawberries. And I'll click out of that. Now I told you why it's important to check the auto select. By doing so, if I click on the cake, now you're going to see the cake appear as selected in the layer palette. If I click on the strawberries, you're going to see the strawberries appear. Now if I unselect it and click, you're not going to see the selections in the layer cake palette. So once again, I'm going to hit auto select, and now you're going to see the items appear as selected in the layer palette. Now let's bring in the whipped cream and place that on top. There we go. And that is layer number 3, so we'll double click on that. And we'll call it whipped cream. Okay, and we'll click out of that. Now let's review. By having selected the auto select, I can now select the cake. There it is. The strawberries, as you can see right there, and the whipped cream right there. Now what if I wanted to put the strawberries on top of the whipped cream? I merely go into the layer palette and drag the strawberries on top of the whipped cream. Let me do that again. I merely click on the strawberries, I hold my mouse down, and I just take and drag it right over there. Now let's say I want to resize the cake. It would be a little hard to do so because the strawberries, the whipped cream, and the cake are on separate layers. So what I'm going to show you to do is how to merge those layers together. I'll click on the first layer on top. I'll hold my Shift key down. I'll go to the last layer. And as a PC user, I will go Control E and watch the palette. And it's merged. Or Command E if you're a Mac user. Now I can take and move it around, and if I want to resize it, I can do that very simply. Now let's go back to the individual layers again, and I'll show you why. Here you have each layer on its own. And let's say that I wanted to darken the strawberries, for example. So I merely click on the strawberries, which is already selected here, and I'll go to the Layer Cake Action Palette, and I'm going to darken it by 10%. There you go. Now let's say I want to sharpen the cake a little bit, but I don't want to sharpen the strawberries, so I click on the cake. As you can see, I went from strawberries, and there's the cake. And I'm going to go over to my sharpening over in the Action Palette, and I'm going to go click on the moderate sharpening, and there, it's now sharpened. Now perhaps I want to darken the whipped cream, so I click here. As you can see, it's selected in the Action Palette. Instead of doing the 5% that I did on the strawberries, let's do 15% on the whipped cream. There we go. This is an example of how each layer, whipped cream, strawberries, and cake, can work on its own. And we will merge them together. And again, Control E. Merges all the layers together. And now that they're together, I can take and reduce the size of them and or do whatever I so choose.